Good morning, everyone, and I'd like to call to order the New York City Audit Committee meeting of Wednesday, January 29th, 2025. And the first item of business, I call upon the secretary to do a roll call.
Good morning, everyone. Our private members, Michael Spitzer, Chair.
Present.
Larry and Angelo is joining us via Zoom.
Present.
Mark Kaplan.
Present.
Marsha Van Wagner. Public members representing Mayor Eric Adams.
Present.
Sarah Wong. Representing Comptroller Brad Lanzer, Jacqueline Thompson.
Present.
We have a quorum. Oh, we just have our public advocate representative, Matthew Carlin. Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item of business is I'd like to have a motion to accept the minutes of the December 11th, 2024 meeting.
I move it, but I do have some comments, if you
Are
would.
they substantive or nits?
Depends on your point of view. Mostly they're grammatical.
Okay, we could do that later then,
I have-
so.
I have a question. Would it be appropriate to have in the minutes some acknowledgement that Wesley, that we were like sad to see Wesley, it was his last meeting and that, that,
But we did that last.
is it in the minutes?
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, I thought it would be nice to
No,
have something in there.
because we did it orally.
Right, but it's not in the minutes.
Okay,
I just
yes.
thought,
I'll give you my,
All right, we'll have Mark give you his comments later. The next item up is the actuarial audit to be presented by Milliman. But before we do so, I'd like to call upon Kristen Olson to make some comments.
Yes, thank you. Hi, I'm Krista Olson, Deputy
Wait,
Controller for
just
Budget.
turn that towards, that's it.
I remember to turn it on.
You don't have to hold your finger down anymore.
That's better. Hi, I'm Krista Olson, Deputy Controller for Budget, and I would like to introduce Milliman to present their final reports for this, for their second engagement. These reports are now on our public website. This presentation will conclude their engagement with us, and I'd like to thank them for their work and their collaboration during this process, with a specific thank you to Scott Porter and Glenn Bowen. But also, before they present, I'd also like to take this moment to thank our partners at the Office of the Actuary's Office, some of whom are here today. Also the system representatives who carefully reviewed numerous drafts, and to our oversight committee, some of whom may be online or here today. Last but not least, I'd also like to thank Rosa Charles for her diligence in keeping this engagement moving forward, which does take some shepherding. And with that, I will turn it over to Milliman. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. This is Scott Porter. Can you hear me?
Well, before you do that, for
mm.
everybody that's in the room that's associated, could you introduce yourselves for the record so it gets into the minutes? For either for, like for Milliman and all the, like other city agencies that are involved.
Rosa Charles, New York City Controller's Office.
Elizabeth
And-
Brown, New York City Controller's Office.
Anderson Huynh, Office of the Actuary.
Craig Liu, Office of the Actuary.
Tom O'Hara, Office of the Actuary. And my name is Dan Haas. I'm with the Bureau of Asset Management with the Comptroller's Office.
And now Milliman and whoever's on Zoom from your firm or anybody else that's associated with the audit.
Yeah, so I'm Scott Porter, the lead consultant on the audit, and I believe Glenn was on, but was having some technical difficulties. Glenn, are you on? So Glenn Bowen still may be rejoining. He was on, and then he messaged me that he got kicked off the Zoom call, so he was trying to join back on. And then we also had a team of individuals who were associated with the various parts of the project. So,
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
The presentation's now yours.
Thank you. So I think, can everyone see screen there?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Can you hold up
and
for a second because
sure.
it's coming in very low as a volume, and we're trying to see if we could raise the volume in this room for what's in the Zoom.
Okay, let me know if I need to try and speak louder or,
No, that's fine, right?
okay. Okay, so thank you very much for having us here, and Krista, thank you for the kind words. It's been, I'll say a real effort on our part in producing all the reports, whether it's for first engagement and second engagement, and we certainly appreciate all the effort from the Office of the Comptrollers, Krista, Rosa, and Beth, and then as well as from the Office of the Actuary. So we appreciate all their assistance, to us in helping us produce these reports that we're going to go over today. So we put together really just, I'll say is a high level presentation to discuss these various reports under the second engagement. We're happy to take questions along the way. So we provided three different reports. One was the administrative report, and this covered our review of the system's benefit calculations. Uh, we produced the independent actuary statement, which covered a review of the economic assumptions and actuarial methods. And then, of course, the primary part of the engagement was to produce the experience study reports. And there were three different reports that we put together. So NICERS was separated, teachers and burrs we combined into a single report, and then police and fire we combined into a single report. So regarding the administrative report, the part two of the administrative report focused on really the validity of the data that's provided by the systems to the Office of the Actuary for the actual valuation purposes. And we did this by comparing the valuation data with actual benefit calculations that were completed by the systems. And we used actual benefit calculations because the calculations are effectively certified. So the data is final sort of at that point in time, although we're going to discuss how not all the calculations are finalized immediately upon retirement. We reviewed 100 benefit calculations across the different systems. And then we reviewed various data elements that we're going to discuss on the next slide and place them into three categories. So one, the data is reasonable. They were consistent with each other. Two, there was potential additional review where the data was somewhat consistent, but a field may have been outside a reasonable range, such as maybe salary might have been more than 10% different. And then three, additional review was recommended, meaning that data was that there was some inconsistency with that particular data element. The report reflects comments from the systems as well as Office of the Actuary on all the potential additional review and then additional review recommended elements. And then the next slide, we're going to detail the methodology and the various elements that we reviewed. So as we noted, we reviewed 100 benefit calculations, and these were for members who retired between July 1, 2020 and June 30, 2021, as this really covered the period we were focused on, we were reviewing. We compared the active data elements in the benefit calculation to the last valuation data before they retired that was provided to the Office of the Actuary, and this would have been for the June 30th, 2020 valuation. And we compared who the member is. So what was their status, their plan code, their tier. We compared their basic date field, so date of birth, membership date. And then we compared their service, salary, and contributions, elements that are used to determine the amount of the benefit. And then for the retiree data elements, we compared those elements in the calculation, in the benefit calculation, to the first valuation data after they retired that was provided to the Office of the Actuary. So this would have been in the June 30th, 2021 valuation. And here we compared what type of retirement it was, so whether it was a service retirement, a disability retirement, if they were a vested retirement or a survivor. Again, basic date fields, date of birth, date of commencement in this case. What was the form of payment elected by the member? So did the member elect a single life annuity? Did they elect a joint survivor annuity to that extent? And then what was the benefit information? So what was the amount paid based on the form of payment that was selected by the member? And then what was the maximum retirement allowance? And so what were our primary findings? So in some cases, we found there were periods of past service that were reflected in the calculation, but were not reflected in the valuation data. And many times these kind of events aren't really finalized until the time of retirement. For BRRRRs, we noticed that earnings used in the calculation for a particular quote, what I'll call as a quote year, were higher than their annual earnings because that year that's used in the calculation may extend beyond a 12-month period of time. And then somewhat typical really in large systems such as these, there's situations where the form of payment that was elected by the member may not have been provided in the valuation data to the Office of the Actuary in that first year after they retired, especially when the member was retiring close to the valuation date. So if they're retiring April, May, and June, that information may not have made it over to the Office of the Actuary at that point in time. There are cases where the systems may pay less than the calculated benefit until the amount is finalized. So the systems may perform what I'll call as an initial calculation and then finalize the calculation at a subsequent period of time. And this applies to police, fire, and NICERs. And then certain decisions that members may make at the time of retirement on excess contributions. So for police and fire, they can elect either a refund of these contributions or convert them to an additional benefit or some combination. So some of that may not have been consistent with the information that was provided for the valuation. And really the key in all of this is to make sure that the data is consistent as possible. And then if benefits are being paid less than that calculated amount initially, that this is communicated to the Office of the Actuary for them to value then that expected benefit properly when the benefit is then going to be finalized. And in I think all the situations, Office of the Actuary is already making all these required adjustments. And then since we received the actual benefit calculations, we also reviewed them for accuracy. So what type of retirement was it? So again, retiree, disability, vested, or survivor. What plan did the member belong to? And then what was the determination of the final average salary and the maximum retirement allowance based on that type of retirement, based on that plan that they belong to? And then we also did what I'll call a general review of the factors and the contributions that were used to convert the benefit to the option that the member may have selected. And in all situations, we found that all the calculations were reasonable and consistent with plan provisions. Is there any questions on the administrative report that you'd like me to take now?
I have a question, just a simple one, I think, which is in terms of the quality of the data for this valuation, how does it compare with previous years? Like, is it consistent? Is it better, worse?
I think we found that all the data was consistent from year to year in terms of what was provided to the Office of the Actuary. A lot of the things that we covered within the benefit calculations, gets to something that's very specific in that year in terms of timing, where the systems are in processing the data versus processing calculations. So it does get into very specifics, for that. But I think generally we found and we received data from 2021 and earlier. So for those 4 years, and we found that data pretty consistent with each other.
One quick comment to add on to that, and I'm sorry I missed the beginning due to some technical difficulties logging in. Thinking back to the interviews we had with the systems at the very beginning of the process, I was kind of struck by the amount of improvement that's going on over time and/or was continuing. So getting to the question of, are things getting better? We sort of witnessed the systems continuing to try to serve their clients better as well. And part of that is the data then going to the Office of the Actuary.
Okay, thanks. Good to hear. Thank you.
Are there any other questions at this time? Please continue.
Thank you. So the next report we produced was the independent actuary statement. In this report, we reviewed economic assumptions, the actuarial methods, actuarial valuation reports. All items were reviewed for compliance with the applicable actuarial standards. We covered the majority of these items in our first engagement, and we really had no additional comments for the second engagement. The slide on the screen here indicates the items that were included in our review. We continue to believe that the economic assumptions, actuarial methods, and valuation reports are in compliance with actuarial standards. And then moving, yeah, go ahead.
Do any of these statements reflect a change from prior periods, though?
I'm sorry, can you, I missed the beginning part of that question.
Have a whole bunch of assumptions here and methods and reports. Is this the same as last year?
Yeah, everything was basically unchanged between the two reports that we had reviewed.
I don't know if this is the right place to ask this question, but I was interested in a quick review of the recognition, 5-year recognition and corridor method to just kind of high level explain how that works. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe you'll get to this in another part of the presentation. I don't know.
no, we probably wouldn't necessarily get to the asset valuation method. Effectively, the actuary is recognizing investment gains and losses over a period of time. And so as they recognize those gains and losses, and the idea is that when you're determining the contribution rate for 1 year, how the market did on kind of the valuation date, you don't want it to impact that specific year. So there's a method that's recognizing those gains and losses over a period of time. And then you just, part of that recognition is if you had any kind of significant gains and losses, if there's anything that was over and above where the final result of that actual value of assets and the market value of assets exceeded a corridor, and I think it's a 20% corridor, exceeded that 20% corridor, then you would limit that actual value of assets to that corridor amount.
So follow-up question on that is, does that carry a risk like that? Let's say the market is doing exceptionally well or exceptionally poorly over a multi-year period, that you kind of get outside the corridor and you're not recognizing, I think it's probably particularly of concern if it's below and on the low side. Does that risk overvaluing the system in a way that affects the adequacy of contributions, for example?
So I think if you had, and it's probably going back now, I'm going to say to like 2008, 2009, where you might have had sort of back-to-back years of significant losses that would have put plans, kind of the calculated actual value of assets would have exceeded sort of the 120% of the market value of assets. So, in essence, if the actual value is that much higher, you're, determining a contribution rate based on assets that are that much higher than what the actual market value is. When you limit that to the 120%, effectively, you're recognizing all those losses in excess of that corridor immediately. So by having the corridor, it produces, I'll say, more recognition immediately of those losses and prevents then that situation of, kind of the actual value of assets that you're determining your contribution rate on versus the market value of assets just sort of continuing to diverge. The whole point of the actual value of assets is to have it track the market value and help basically smooth out the fluctuations that occur from a year to year perspective, a year-to-year period of time.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question on how did you handle inflation? Because, the market will go up and down, but prices, once they go up, the CPI does not really fall. So how did you factor in that, large spike we had for a few years?
Yeah, so our period that we were reviewing was really through June 30, 21. So it really hasn't reflected kind of the inflationary increases since then. Some of the things when we're looking at, and in terms of salary increases, when we start talking about like salary increases. So when we're looking at experience from the salary increases from basically 2012 to 2021, we noticed that actual salary increases were lower than the current assumption. And so that might tend itself to reduce that salary increase assumption. But since then, inflationary aspects have increased. Salaries have, increased related to that. So any change in that assumption, you want to certainly, combine what sort of current expectations are. And then, of course, inflation assumption also impacts, what you think the investments are going to earn. So if inflation is higher, you probably think you're going to, the return on the investments might long-term be a little bit higher as well. So that becomes a factor in that. And then, of course, if inflation is higher, then cost of living adjustments to retirees would then also be higher. So, the question is this period of time since 2022, it's kind of carried through, and we're still probably a little bit higher. 2024, I think, even the Social Security cost of living adjustment was 2.5%. So it kind of started to come back down from those couple of years that were really high. The Fed is still targeting a 2% kind of long-term inflation. So I would think long-term, we're still anticipating inflation to come back down to kind of where it was for the most part for the past, I'll say 20 years.
Yeah, and if I could add on just inflation, as Scott went through, inflation kind of underlies all of the economic assumptions and is not, our approach is not what happened last year and let's react to that. The approach is that we're looking at a valuation which payments extend over multiple decades. Neither Scott nor I are on our investment team, so I know enough to be dangerous, but we have some sources that we look at to set the inflation assumption. There's a market-based inflation assumption implied in the price of tips, the Treasury and inflation-protected securities. I believe the Cleveland Fed issues forecasts, and there is a survey of professional forecasters. So we look at a couple sources that take a look at the long-term view of inflation, and then we start there as the basis for building all of the rest of the assumptions.
And I have a little bit of a follow-up to that. I'm sorry you're being double teamed by the economists on the committee, but so your view is that for any recommendations you're making for, going forward assumptions, that you have sort of adequately taken into account the impacts of, the sort of COVID era inflation and other, demographic phenomena that we have seen experienced in the last couple of years. Right?
Yeah, I mean, the current economic assumptions, we weren't recommending any changes to them. We believe long-term, they continue to be reasonable. So, reflecting short-term fluctuations and long-term sort of, expectations. And then in terms of some of the, kind of the demographic assumptions that are related to that, which is really salary increases is really the primary one. We were recommending some small reductions to the salary increase assumption based on the experience because we did see a difference between the two, but not to the extent of where the experience was. And then, but of course, when, again, the data we're looking at in terms of the salary increases was through 2021. So any change in that salary increase assumption, I think, needs to be reflective of, probably what's happened in the last, couple of years in terms of salary increases. And sometimes with governmental municipalities, salary increases lag what actual inflation was for a year, union contracts and such. So sometimes, you'll see a high period of inflation, but that kind of gets spread through union contracts over a 5 or 6 year period after it's occurred. And so when you have lower periods of inflation, you'll see that, again, it might happen after 5 or 6 years. So our 10-year focus on the data was through 2021 was generally a lower inflationary level during that period of time.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so
Excuse me, if we
yeah,
look at
sure.
what the president is injecting into the system now, would that have some impact on how you view all of what you've covered?
Yes. Initially, it's hard to say, but I think any actions that are occurring, sort of currently will always inform your decisions of, what, kind of future expectations are and whether or not they are, short-term changes, sort of long-term changes. I think as Glenn pointed out, the actuaries projecting benefits out over multiple decades, so over a really long period of time. And so you get these sort of fluctuations that can occur. And fluctuations can occur from a year standpoint, they can occur from a 4 or 5 year standpoint. But when you're looking at things over a 50 to a 75 to almost really 100 year standpoint, um, you're smoothing all that in, you're reflecting what's that really long-term view. But, you know, things, actual policies have to pass and what's the impact on the markets and all that will eventually feed into, sort of recommendations we make for all of our clients.
Doesn't seem to be any other questions, so please continue.
Okay. So the next reports were the experience study reports. I mentioned there's kind of 3 different versions, or not 3 different versions, but 3 of them, one covering NICERs and then, just covering all 5 systems. So, in the first engagement, our primary purpose was really to provide the observations of what the experience was versus, I'll say, is the key actuarial assumptions. And then the second engagement here, the primary purpose was to provide recommendations on those assumptions. So how it relates, salary-related items, so salary increases and overtime, pre-retirement demographic assumptions. So basically, when are members expected to leave employment upon withdrawal, retirement, or disability? And then life expectancy, so pre-retirement, post-retirement mortality assumptions. Our approach in selecting the proposed assumptions was really to reflect an assumption that was in between what was currently being assumed and then the experience. And I'll say, but it's depending on the credibility of the experience that was being studied, or if we were proposing in what I would say is a change in the assumption structure. So, as an example for retirement, we recommended an assumption that varies by years of service in addition to age for many of the systems. And in this case, we suggested assumptions that kind of more closely aligned with that experience. The proposed assumptions were incorporated into what we call the MEST, Milliman's Experience Study Tool, which really believe help provide, I'll say, great insight into that experience of the plans based on their many data elements. So whether it was age, service, their plan, their employee group, it really helped us in reviewing the assumptions. Our proposed assumptions were discussed with the Office of the Actuary through a series of conference calls, virtual meetings, We appreciated their assistance and feedback throughout the process. And then in the presentation, we included several slides kind of on the results of the experience study, but really our intent is just to cover the next two slides and really primarily the next slide that provides an overall summary of all the assumptions and the possible impacts on them. We're happy to take questions on any of the slides that you may have. And then, and then over the next couple of slides, we provide our thoughts on the direction of the impact on the liabilities of the systems on the proposed assumptions. But we were not engaged to actually perform the replication nor determine that cost impact. So it's just what we believe, based on our experience, the direction would be, but we don't really have a sense of what that magnitude would be. The actual impact would depend on the analysis that's conducted by the Office of the Actuary and the demographics of the current membership groups. So with that, so this is kind of our overall results summary and provided for all the 5 systems. On the next slide, we have a little more details on NICERs because there's basically like 5 different groups on NICERs. So it provides some additional detail on them. And on this slide, we kind of break it up into the top elements were changes that we believe that would result in higher liabilities. Kind of in the middle of the slide, as you kind of look across, you'll see that there's items then where we believe the results would result in lower liabilities. And then towards the bottom of the slide, changes to assumptions where we're not really sure of what the impact is. So changes being made in some cases may have resulted in, might have increased or might have decreased, and it might vary depending on the specific demographics of the individuals. So just some general comments really across the systems. So on overtime, we found that actual overtime was higher than expected, and then proposed increases would result in higher liabilities. The general pattern was basically that overtime increased by service, but that was not necessarily higher in that year before retirement. And as we talked about before, salary increases were generally lower than expected. And so the proposed increases would result in lower liabilities for them. And again, the study period was based on a generally lower inflationary environment. So any changes to the salary increase assumption should reflect current expectations on that. From a retirement perspective, for NICERs, teachers, and BERS, we found that the experience varied by years of service in addition to age, meaning basically we saw lower rates of retirement for members who had less than 20 years of service versus those who had more than 20 years of service. And this was primarily due to the difference in the benefit formula. And then in some cases, the proposed rates were even lower if they had less than 10 years of service because they were not eligible for post-retirement health benefits. So taking into account the benefit levels that the person may get as they progress through their career and reach 10 years of service threshold, 20 years of service threshold. For withdrawal, so people who are leaving before reaching retirement, we proposed rates that vary by age in addition to service, as we found that older members had lower rates of termination than younger members at the same service points. Overall, this might actually result in higher levels of termination among those younger members, and there's more of them within the system. And this is where some of that impact on plan liabilities is generally unknown of probably lower liabilities for younger members, higher liabilities for older members. What the overall impact is sort of depends on the mix of the demographics of the group. From a disability standpoint, we were proposing applying the assumption during periods where the member would benefit from it. So there was very little disability experience if the member was already eligible for unreduced retirement and the 2% benefit formula. So by focusing the rates of disability on the period where the members benefit, we found that there was higher rates of disability experience emerged and then would result in higher plan liabilities. For accidental disability benefits for police and fire, they're impacted by basically the World Trade Center benefits. We found that the experience was lower than the assumptions. And so the proposed assumptions would result in lower plan liabilities for that particular cause. And then the big thing is then post-retirement mortality, which is really life expectancy. Member retires, how long are they anticipated to receive their benefits for? We're primarily the proposed assumptions was primarily, I'll call it tweaks to the current assumption, basically resulting in lower rates of mortality at younger retirement ages and then higher rates of mortality at older retirement ages. So this could cause liabilities for existing retirees, where that average age may be around 75 to decrease, whereas the liabilities for active members who are anticipated to retire in their early 60s, probably on average, would increase. So that's where you'll see sometimes we'll say post-retirement mortality is resulting in higher plan liabilities, but post-retirement mortality for retirees would result in lower plan liabilities. So what's the impact? So we believe that package of proposed assumptions would most likely result in higher liabilities for NYSERS, teachers, and police, result in a decrease in plan liabilities for BERS. For fire, we're not sure of what the overall impact was, as the proposed changes were smaller in nature. There's a lot on the slide, a lot we talked about. Before I go to the next slide, is there any just sort of general questions on?
A general question. This is more, I mean, these experience studies sometimes can uncover things that are good to alert management to in terms of workforce trends or whatever. Was there anything that stuck out to you that might be like a red or yellow flag for management?
I mean, I think what we've talked about, I think is overtime. Is probably the biggest thing that we probably saw in terms of there was some current assumptions that that sort of in the year before they retire, that they would have higher overtime at that point in time. I think what we saw was for, let's say, police, was that overtime was just correlated with service. Um, and so when they reach eligibility for retirement, overtime was just higher. But whether they actually retire the next year or not didn't seem to be the indicator. It was just the fact that the person had reached 20 years of service and they were just working at a higher level of overtime at that point in time. So I think it was more the overtime. I think the other interesting thing that, we found was really on retirement, where, typically you expect, depending on how old someone is, would indicate when they would retire from the system, but really service had, as much of an indicator. So if someone was, basically at 60 years old, but they had 15 years of service, they were more likely to delay retirement until they reached that 20 years of service mark, versus the person who was at 60 years old and had the 20 years of service. So I think those are probably the two things, that we saw in understanding the experience of the data.
I just had a question on ordinary death, just to clarify. So ordinary death in NYSERS, it makes the plan liability higher because those people live longer than expected. And then in BERS, the ordinary death lowers liabilities because they die younger than expected. Is that the?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Everything was relative to the assumption. Correct. Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, and what was true, teachers live forever, right? Like, so that continues to be, true. So good for my daughter, who's now a second grade teacher. But yeah, some of those things that you see across the different systems when we're developing the the mortality assumptions. We were reviewing them against proposed assumptions that the Society of Actuaries had published. And I don't think I'm leaking anything right now, but Society of Actuaries is going to be publishing new mortality tables within the next week-ish, I believe, next week or two, on public plans. So they're just wrapping up the report. And some of the experience that was coming out of that was consistent with what we saw here in terms of higher mortality among older individuals than was previously anticipated.
So I have more follow-up on death. So 2021 were big years for dying, and I'm wondering if that might distort some of these, some of the experience findings that you have, and whether how enduring those might be, if there are trends or just due to, COVID.
Yep. Yeah. So in the study, we could see higher, we were able to review the experience by year. And so we could see the higher levels of mortality occurring in 2021 to a lesser degree in I'll say it's fiscal year 2021, so which covers the period July 1, 20 through June 30, 21, and then fiscal year 2020, so it's covering through June 30, 2020, with COVID, reaching the point when everything shut down was kind of March of 2020. And so we excluded those years in the study when we were developing the recommended changes in the assumption. So we really focused in on experience through 2019. In terms of the long-term impact, the Society of Actuaries has been studying that. And it seems like long-term, at some level, it's about a 2% to 3% increase in mortality than what was being expected. Another way of putting that is effectively that mortality in 2024 was really similar to the mortality in 2019. And as actuaries, when we're reviewing the mortality assumption, but part of that assumption is not just the experience, but is how is that experience going to emerge in the future? And so we apply what we call an improvement scale, such that, people in the future will live longer than people in the past or currently at the same age. So a 60-year-old in 2040 would live longer than a 60-year-old in 2000. But what seems to be coming out is that there was no improvement, I'll say, during this 5-year period of time with the pandemic. So, deaths spiked during those couple periods. They've kind of come back down. It's at a point now where actual mortality is still higher than what was expected based on those proposed increases, or I should say decreases in rates of mortality, increases in life expectancy from 2019. But for the most part, it looks like we're sort of at the same levels we were in 2019.
If I could expand on that just a little bit, that consideration of COVID in this study period, which will also work its way into the next 4-year audit cycle, it was not just limited to mortality. I mean, macroeconomic events, pandemics, whatever happens to be going on in the world can impact termination, retirement. So if you think back to the Great Recession, people aren't going to quit their jobs because they can't find another job. So an actuary looking at that would say, how much do I factor that into my long-term expectations? And Scott kind of mentioned that for COVID, we had the 1 year and 3 months and excluded that in the mortality. And certainly there's going to be more data in the next engagement. And again, the next actuary who looks at this will have more experience on did retirement bounce back, did termination bounce back, and what extent will adjustments be needed in the future. But so it's not just it can impact basically everything.
when the disease hit, people were taking lower workloads. Some effect, I assume, on their compensation. How does that all work in?
I think there were, and this kind of impacted, I'll say the overtime, because there were some cases we saw where overtime, and again, we were able to look at it by year. So overtime in 2020 or 2021 was higher than previously. In other cases, we saw that overtime was lower, so it just kind of depended sort of on the type of worker you were. Um, so when we were looking at the assumption, in all of our assumptions, that was part of, I'll say, our calculus. Again, we can the experience study is really helping to kind of statistically determine here's what the prior assumption was, here's what that experience was, how do they compare, and then really when we're proposing assumptions, is trying to reflect, well, what was all the experience that happened during this period of time? How is that anticipated to impact kind of the long-term future, not necessarily that short-term future, but at least that long-term future. And sort of in developing the proposed assumptions, that's what we, try to reflect or not reflect as the case may be.
How has overtime still continued to increase with a majority of the workforce working from home?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't answer that. I mean, maybe the Office of the Actuary could in terms of, because our data only went through the 2021 valuation.
I could speak on that. So based on our recent data, I would say overtime has gone up more for the uniform groups, so police and fire. But with respect to the civilian groups, I would say it's more or less still level. It hasn't really gone up all that much. So.
Thank you. Please continue.
Sure, I can figure out where I am. Okay. So I think the last slide I was going to cover was just a little more detail on NICERS. There's really 5 groups within NICERS: general, correction, sanitation, bridges and tunnels, that's TBTA, and then transit. And then really within general, we kind of split general out into 2 groups into itself. So those what we call the basic plan groups. So they could retire under the regular plan or the basic plan, the H57 plan, or if they were specialty groups, that would allow them to retire at 25 years of service. Some of the groups might have required a minimum age of 50, might have required a minimum age of 55. Many of the comments we kind of said in the prior slide that applied to all the systems, including NICERS, would really also apply to kind of all the groups here within NICERS. So again, we kind of list, different assumptions that we think would result in higher plan liabilities. For the most part on general, I think it was just reflecting proposed assumptions really for the specialty groups versus the basic plan groups that we think would reflect in most likely higher plan liabilities, for them. And so, I mean, the rest of it is all pretty consistent, kind of across the board in terms of what we've talked about. So we think the plan liabilities for each of the systems would probably increase, depending on the mix, depends on the overall impact. As I mentioned, that we weren't engaged to determine that impact, so I'm not sure what the overall final result would be. And then the remaining slides just cover additional details on for each of the systems, each of the groups within the systems, and then each of the assumptions. I wasn't intended to go through each of them in detail today, so happy to take additional questions that you may have.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. But I'd like to ask the city, what's the next steps? And
Well, I think the Office of the Actuary is in the process of reviewing the recommendations, and that's kind of, and maybe, so I'll turn
Yeah,
it to
I can
Anderson.
speak on that. So yeah, we are in the process of reviewing the recommendations. We recognize that there is a lot of noise in the last 2 years of the study with regards to COVID, and so we would like to see a few more years first before we make any changes. So that's the sense, that's the position that we're at right now.
that would be covered in the next audit?
That's correct.
Yes, we're in the final stages of review in our RFP process for the next round.
Now, the concern is we are responsible for the hiring. So
I
that's
think we'll
my
be
concern.
back. We'll be back shortly, I think.
Okay. All right. Thank you, and thanks for everybody that came here for this presentation.
Thank you all. And if I could take 30 seconds to close out, I'd like to mention that this has certainly been a monster undertaking for us, probably an order of magnitude bigger than most projects that we take on of this size. Over the years we've worked with the comptroller staff and the OA staff and working with the systems as well to get data, we got a tremendous amount of cooperation. And when we issued our draft reports, we got very thorough reviews. And I can't see everybody who's at the table. One of the questioners earlier was asking about improvement in quality over the course of time. I mean, the experience study was what it was. We gave our recommendations, but when we're doing things like the audit of the benefit calculations or the reviews of the data, anything which is kind of, I'll call it the audit function, by nature of that task, you focus on areas of improvement. And I would just like to note that that's on a baseline of quality work. So we focus on the areas for improvement because that's what we're asked to do, but wanted to make clear that we saw quality efforts and work going through across the board. So thanks to all the parties that I mentioned.
Thank you for that. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Uh, Next up on the agenda is the New York City Employees Retirement Systems Pension Plans, financial statements, excuse me. So please identify yourself and who is here with you. Just press it, the middle button.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Excellent. So good morning, everyone. My name is Cheng Gang. I'm the Director of Finance and NYSERS. Accompanying to me today are Tom Cambaras, the Chief Information Officer at NYSERS, and we also have Herman Bernal, the
We're losing
Director.
You gotta try to speak into the mic.
Yes. Okay, is that better?
Yes.
We have Herman the Bernal, the Director of Internal Audit. Where's Dan? Oh, Dan Units, the Chief Information Security Officer, and we have Sue Lam, the Supervisor of Accounting and Financial Reporting. So Grant Thornton were still NYSER's independent auditors for fiscal year 2024. There has been no findings today that have impacted NYSER's financial statements. So similar to last year's, NYSER's received 2 awards. One is the GFOA, Certificate of Achievement. The other is the Public Pension Standards Award for Funding and Administration from the Public Pension Coordinating Council. Both awards are presented in the NYSER's most recent ACFR, published in December 2024. So Sue Lam, our Accounting and Financial Reporting Supervisor, prepared the NYSER's financial statements. So I thought she would be the best person to present the financials for NYSER's this year. So go ahead, Sue.
Good morning. Do you hear me? Okay. Oh, okay. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to talk about NYSER's financial highlights. Assets, you can find it on page 13 and 14 of the financial statement. QPP's net position as of June 30th, 2024 reached $86.9 billion, up from $81.4 billion at June 30th, 2023. NYSER's 2024 financial statement shows VSF net position as of June 30th, 2024 at $1 billion, up from $994 million at June 30th, 2023. The QPP and VSF combined is $87.9 billion, an increase of about $5.5 billion from 2023. Now we're going to talk about the market return. You can find that information on page 11 of the financial statement. The total pension fund returned 9.88% for fiscal year 2024, less than the NYSER's policy benchmark of 12.49%. Domestic equities, which accounts for about a quarter of the total portfolio, returned 22.98%, less than the Russell 3000 benchmark of 23.13%. Total World ex USA or EAFE makes up about 10% of the total portfolio, return 8.36%. Emerging market, consisting about 5% of the total portfolio, return 15.9%. The total fixed asset segment holding is 38.5% of total portfolio, return 5.18%. Funded status. You will find funded plans funding ratio on page 16 as well as in the actuary section of the ACFR, page 215. Based on the entry age normal cost method, funded ratio is at 82.5% as of June 30th, 2022, the date of the most recent actuarial valuation. The ratio went up from 81.5% as of June 30th, 2021. Additionally, on page 16 of the ACFR, you will find that the plan's fiduciary net position represents 84.3% of total pension liability for NYSERS and the 5 VSF on June 30th, 2024, as
Excuse me.
required.
The pagination you're referring to is different than the one I have in front of me.
What we have is the ACRF. And you're talking about the standalone financials.
So it's a way of, for example, on page 103 I have in front of me, all of the currencies you're invested in. Where does that translate into what you're talking about?
So we can use the ACFR page numbers also.
That would be handy because I'm trying to figure out where I am and I can't do it.
Okay, no problem, because we weren't sure if you have the financial
No,
statements or the ACFR.
We have the ACRFs.
Okay, so we would just use the ACFR page numbers.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, the accurate, for the market return, the accurate pages are page 150 and 151.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Do you want us to go back to the
Oh, I
beginning
have
of the
some
present?
comments on the earlier stuff. I may do the pagination differently. For example, page 103, currencies you're in, you have 3 at the bottom, which are trivial. Why do you even have them? You got 1 Moroccan something or other dollar, and 180 Russian ruble, and 600 pounds. The cost of printing that is more than they're worth. Why do you keep carrying trivial things like that?
Sure. I'm going to defer that to actually the comptroller's office because we receive the information directly from them. So all the investment related tables were from them.
Not that what's in it. Seems a waste of time and money to deal in small items like that for something this big.
Holdings less than $1 million.
Sure. We will take that suggestion for next year's. Thank you.
That's one thing.
Can you tell me the page numbers again? It's 123.
I'm going back.
That was on 103.
Thank you. Page 123. Okay. Thank you.
Back to see what I have. Oops.
Please continue.
Okay, thank you. Next up is on VSF. In December 2023, the QPP transferred to 4 of the 5 VSF approximately $8.3 million in benefit payment. Based on the actuary's estimate as of June 30th, 2024, the skim payable to the corrections officers VSS for fiscal year 2024 was $80.1 million. As a reminder, these $12,000 a year payments are guaranteed by law since calendar year 2019. That concludes my presentation of financial. We welcome any questions you may have.
Let me just.
Larry, and you have any comments or questions? Okay, thank you for coming this.
Wait,
all right.
I look at the number of modest size investment management consultants. I'm looking at the number of independent consultants and money managers you have. Is that the most efficient way to do things, to have so many relatively small ones? Or do you do it for a particular purpose? Different markets, different skills. I used to be in the business, that's why I ask.
I'd like to defer that question to the comptroller's office.
I suppose I might be an appropriate person to answer that. We act as the investment advisor to the systems, pardon me, on an annual basis, and we've articulated the strategic asset allocation by hiring a number of managers. For NICERS in particular, we invest at scale. The number of managers that we hire is really a function of their active or passive investment mandate, and then among the investment strategies that we've allocated assets to through strategic asset allocation. To the extent that we have small dollar managers, in all likelihood, that either means we're transitioning in or out of a particular manager at that point in time, or I'd have to kind of do a little bit of. I'd have to come back to you on specific instances if you'd like to highlight a few for me.
Okay. I figured that was the answer. The other thing I point out that's my pet peeve, is the fact that you don't capitalize "the" in the city in the letter from the Office of Actuary. Have it, the title, the city's official name is the capital. And I've been,
So capital
always-
C with city?
I always raise that question just for fun.
Capital T. Blah.
Official name is the capital T, city. Well done, what? Not on this one.
Thank you. And next up is the teachers' retirement system. But even before we continue, I'd like to introduce the new representative for the public advocate, Matthew Carlin.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, Matthew is replacing Wesley Presley.
Yeah, the whole ACFR. So ACFR is the full entire one. That's the one they're using. You guys consider okay. So they're using the
This is the one I'm looking at.
He likes to lift weights or paper weights.
I'd like to point out that on the annual comprehensive financial report, the two T's are missing from the. I'll give you this.
Yeah. All right. Mitchell, just introduce yourself and whoever's here with you for the minutes of the meeting.
Let me borrow your pen from him.
And Grant Thornton is your auditors.
Good morning. I'm Barbara Ovcharczyk, Financial Reporting Manager, representing the Teachers Accounting Department. Along me are Richard Fruchter, Assistant Chief Accountant, George Javiarchir, Investment Accounting Manager, and Nivina Plachkova, Financial Reporting Accountant. On behalf of Teachers Retirement System, I would like to express gratitude to TRS management, staff, and Grant Thornton for the continued collaboration and dedication throughout the year. Thank you. We also appreciate the Audit Committee's time at this opportunity to present an overview of fiscal year 2023 combining financial statements. The teachers' financial combining statements received unmodified opinion and letter of no material weaknesses. The IT audit recommended correcting a control deficiency in terms of code promotion. The 2024 financial report marks the 10th year of the teachers combining financials. The report consolidates the 401A qualified pension plan QPP and 403B tax deferred annuity TDA program. The QPP net position as of June 30, 2024 was 74.5 billion, an increase of 9.6 from previous year 67.9 billion. the TDA net position totaled 49.1 billion, representing an 8.2 increase from prior year's 45.4 billion. The combining net position of the QPP and TDA was 123.6 billion as of June 30, 2024. This figure is detailed on page 440, thank you, of the combining statements of net position, and it also referenced on page 210 of the city's 2024 annual comprehensive financial report. Investment performance. Investment performance is influenced by the allocation of assets across different market sectors and the returns generated by those sectors. As of June 30, 2024, the target assets allocation for the pension fund were as follows: 34.4 in fixed income, 27.3 in domestic equity, 17.5 international equity, and 20.8 in alternative investments. The breakdown of alternative investment holdings is found in the Note 3 Investments on page 66. Thank you. Teachers' investment performance for fiscal year 2024 mirrored the returns of the key market indices. The U.S. Equity Focus Russell 3000 Index returned 23.1%. The International Stock Focus MSCI Index, Morgan Stanley Capital International World Index, returned 10.8%. The Bloomberg U.S. Mortgage-Backed Security Index returned 2.12%, while the New York City Custom Structured Index returned 2.49. These returns are in the MDA section on pages 31. Thank you. The pension fund as a whole returned 9.94%, and this can be found on Schedule 3, required supplementary information, page number 83. Current investment holding. As of December 31st, 2024, teachers' holding increased another 2.5% compared to June 30th. The QPP statutory interest expense to the TDA increased to 2.4 billion. The QPP experienced an income of 3.3 billion on investments attributable to the TDA funds. This can be found in the table on page 33. The system's QPP and TDA combined benefits payment increased by 4.4. The increase was mostly due to increase in required minimum distribution, death benefit payment, and increase in payments to retirees. These figures are on page 41 and 42, statement of changes in net position. Funding status, market value basis. As of June 30, 2024, the fiduciary net position represented 85.7% of the total pension liability. This calculation reflects the current fair market value of plan assets. The detailed information is available in the required supplementary information schedule number 1 on pages 77. Funding status actuarial basis. The funded status based on the actuarial assets value to the entry age normal actuarial accrued liability determined as of June 30, 2022 was 85.5. Other point to note, fiscal year 2024 administrative expense included 3.4 million of accruals due to recognition of interest and amortization expenses as required by GASB 87 leases. The combined TDE and QPP admin expense, excluding these lease-related accruals, amounted to 91.9 million. In fiscal year 2024, TRS implemented GASB 100, accounting changes and error corrections. The adoption of this standard had no significant impact on teachers' financial statements. Finally, the MD&A includes the breakdown of financial activity by employer on page 31, 38, schedules detailing the QPP and TDE cash flow, QPP and TDE holding in funds, percentage of controller managed pension fund versus TRS managed variable funds on pages. Thank you. This ends my presentation, and we are welcome any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry, and you have any questions or comments? Yeah.
No,
I just-
actually, I'm okay now. I'm fine.
Okay. Mark?
And I say you do. Each of these funds compare their results.
We're aware of, PERS and police's performance over the past few years.
How do you think you compare? Curiosity, how does your portfolio compare to the others in terms of percentage returns and percentage incomes?
Thank you. Yeah, I think in the past few years, police I think has done the best, and PERS has done well too.
At some point, want you to be able to be this in the same range of performance that theirs are?
Again, it's definitely reviewed. Obviously, we have joint meetings, separate meetings, so it's definitely understood.
Oh, forgive me.
I mean,
if I had a business that was performing where one of my subs was performing badly compared to the others, I want to know why.
I mean, historically, we have some idea what historically in terms of what positions we're taking on what type of assets, and it's obviously looked at every month.
You know what I'm saying, and that if your performance is worse than the others, can't you fix it up?
I think changes were already made in this regard, but.
If I could add a comment, I'll just note that each system sets a strategic asset allocation target in consultation with the general consultants, specialty consultants, and it's sort of led and approved by each board of trustees. Teachers has a specific implementation. It's a little bit different than the other systems, and that drives a lot of what you'd see in performance differential. If we look at the results for the year, teachers return 10%. NYSERS says it looks like they were about 9.9. So they were mid-pack trailing, tail end of the pack, but they were, the differential between all the systems amounted to about 0.5% for the year. You saw PERS performing particularly well because they have a much larger allocation to public markets, which performed quite well in that particular year. One could offer a corollary there that a system like teachers, which has a relatively higher allocation to alternative assets, you would see less drawdown risk in down markets probably lower overall portfolio volatility on an ex post or historical basis. So again, it's a decision, it's a trade-off that the trustees made when setting their allocations.
Mock-up of some of the stuff.
All right, yeah, he'll give it to Katrina, who will get it to you.
Okay.
All right? Thank you for coming this morning.
Thank you.
Tell Paul I said hello.
Sure.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the Board of Education Retirement System, otherwise known as BERS. Yeah. Good morning. Please introduce yourselves for the record.
Good morning. My name is Chitra Subramaniam. I'm the Director of Fiscal Operations at BERS. Joining me today is Mr. Qazi Ahmed, Deputy Director of Fiscal Operations. I have with me virtually Mrs. Izifali Ade, Director of Internal Audit, Mr. Navi Chandar from the BERS Fiscal Operations team. Our auditors are from Grant Thornton, represented by Ms. Sharon Campbell, Mr. Will Richardson, and the audit team. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Office of the Actuary, the Comptroller's Office, Bureau of Accountancy, and the Bureau of Management for their continued support and guidance. I would like to briefly summarize the financial highlights for fiscal year 2024. BERS combined net position for fiscal year 2024 was 10.2 billion, an increase of 10% from fiscal year 2023. The QPP's net position was 6.8 billion, and the TDS net position was 3.4 billion. Investments were at 10.9 billion. The return of investments was 9% of the total investments. Our fixed asset mix consists of 47% equity, 28% fixed income, and 25% total alternative private investment. Total contributions, which include the employer and the employee contributions at the end of fiscal year 2024, were at 432 million, and benefit payments were at 502 million. The QPP net position as a percentage of total pension liability was 97.43% in fiscal year 2024. Among other key highlights, Chapter 721 of the laws of 2023 was signed into law on December 8, 2023, and took effect on July 1, 2024. Now, this law provides that employees who are eligible to join BERS will be automatically enrolled unless they opt out within 90 days of employment. Approximately 20,000 new members have joined BERS through auto-enrollment. Secure 2.0 Act of 2022 provides for the adoption of Roth TTA meeting certain income and age criteria beginning January 2024. BERS expanded the program to provide Roth TTA options to all TTA contributing participants. More recently, Chapter 551 of the laws of 2024 was signed into law on December 11, 2024, and took effect on the same day. Now, effective December 11, 2024, any DOE employee that is an active BERS member in a UFT represent title has the right to transfer their BERS membership to TRS by December 10, 2025. Moving on to GFOA submissions, BERS received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for its ACFR for the fiscal year 2023's annual report submission. I'm pleased to inform you that for the fiscal year 2024, in addition to participating the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for its ACFR program, BERS is also participating for the first time in the popular annual financial reporting PAFR Awards category. Both the reports, ACFR and the PAFR, are available online at the BERS website. Thank you.
I'm going to give you some pages with little editorial stuff.
Sure.
Comment that I made before for others about having these minor positions in foreign currencies. It's just a leftover or a beginning, or it's a mistake to have $41,000 in one. So the last 4 or 5 of these things look a little funny.
Larry, and do you have any comments for Burrs?
Yeah, I have one question. I'm looking at the currencies, the foreign currencies. And, I see the Colombian peso at 3. Is there a reason you're still holding on to that? It was 4 in 2023 and now it's 3. Is there any reason for hanging on?
I would request BAM to please support me in this.
Yeah, I think we may be tripping over an editorial choice here. So I would imagine that those 3 Colombian pesos we see this year may be unrelated to the 4 Colombian pesos we saw last year, or the $4 worth of Colombian pesos. Often in these markets, we don't have large allocations to Colombia, to my knowledge. What you'd see though is a dividend payment perhaps, or some residual that's sitting there. We should have an automatic sweep set up with the custodian that clears those periodically and repatriates them automatically, but it is certainly possible for something to slip through cracks there. But I think the larger comment that, perhaps it's not constructive to look at these sort of de minimis exposures on the financials is certainly valid and something we should take back. I can say that for the purposes of completeness and creating a clear audit trail, my team does provide a complete record, and that's what we seek to do. But if we need to suppress that, we certainly can.
Well, I don't think it's a question suppressing the record. I think it's just a question about why you're holding on to 3 Colombian pesos when even, last year was only 4. I don't know why you held on to that either. It's just, I don't think you need to suppress it. I'm curious
I'm
as to
sorry.
why you
Poor
still
choice
have
of
it.
words. I meant a changed presentation of that. I mean, it's again, we would have a complete record for the audit purposes, and if it's more constructive to group those small de minimis currencies together with an appropriate note, we certainly can support that.
Down to small stuff on page 7. That's a very small piece of money they have in a fund of this size.
Okay, forgive me. I don't have the act in front of me, but
whatever it is,
yeah.
you've got in this schedule of supplementary information about fund managers, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 people with very small fees, which means they manage a very small amount of money. And for something of this size, that can't make sense.
Okay, I can certainly bring that back and help you find an explanation for it. I'll mention that each of the systems adopted a new strategic asset allocation in late 2023. So it was affected during this fiscal year, the rebalancing of the portfolio to out of old mandates into new mandates. There wasn't a lot of individual manager turnover, but for instance, we did for Burrs exit our TIPS allocation. That can create some weird, as you look at a balance sheet or a point in time type of summary, that can show you managers with a relatively small asset level. or to the extent that we hired a new manager late in the year, you'd see a relatively small amount of fees accrued to them.
Well, that may be an answer, but I just
Yeah.
point that out. Let me have some more fun with you.
Okay.
On page 79, you talk about consultants, investment consultants. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. The idea that a fund in this kind goes to San Diego and Toronto, Ontario for portfolio advice bothers me.
That's a fair point. We have purview within our bureau over the fund's general consultant. Of course, it's the general consultant is hired by the fund itself, but we work fairly closely with them. And then to the extent that there are specialty investment consultants to advise for our private equity allocations, or many of our alternative funds have specialty consultants as well. We have interaction with them. However, there are a number of other investment consultants that are hired by the system itself, which I don't have a lot of visibility into, unfortunately.
Well, one was a pension benchmarking service for $24,000.
Yeah, is that the Toronto company?
Yep.
Yeah, that is a company called CEM Benchmarking. That actually falls within the Bureau of Asset Management. That allows us to compare our costs, or the costs that the pension system incurs, to a standardized set of peers. Other large pensions in excess of $10 billion. It's something we've been doing for years.
That's an explanation. One more minute and I'll turn pages and I'll leave you alone.
I would like to comment on the San Diego. They are actually following,
Move this closer to your mouth.
Okay.
And you don't need to hold.
Yeah.
You don't need to. Oh, okay.
Just make sure it's lit.
Okay, got it. We are in the process of actively, there's an active procurement going on. So, this consultant might not be there in the next year's list of consultants. Yeah.
Pages here, I'll be done in a minute.
You made the actuary's office laugh. Okay, thank you for coming this morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And once again, some comments might go to Katrina, who will get them to you.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll give you this. These
Okay, yeah, sure. Even better. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next up on the agenda is the New York City Police Pension Fund.
Okay. So I'll get rid of them.
I still have this from teachers, which is part of yours. This is the police. Please identify yourselves for the minutes and the record.
Sure. Good morning. I'll apologize. I have the case of the sniffles, so if you guys can't hear me, just feel free to let me know to repeat myself. It's a pleasure to present in front of the New York City Audit Committee. My name is Stanley Thomas. I'm the Chief Fiscal Officer at the New York City Police Pension Fund. I'm accompanied by our Chief Strategy Officer, Christine Clyde, our Chief Technology Officer, Dennis Green, and our Deputy Director of Accounting, Anna Russo, and other key members of our team. I'm just going to jump into the numbers. The fund's net position increased by $4.3 billion. Or
just please remember, if you're giving page numbers, we have the ACFA.
Yes, yes. I have a more high-level overview, but I picked up from the previous presentations. The fund's net position increased by 4.3 billion or 7.9%. So we're at 58.5 billion for fiscal 24. Compared to fiscal 23, we were at 54.3 billion. Increases and decreases in the fund's net position are primarily due to the fluctuation of investment returns, as you guys know, member contributions, and benefit payments and withdrawals. During fiscal 2024, member contributions increased 38% to 369.5 million as compared to fiscal 23 contributions, which were 267.7 million. Increases and decreases in member contributions are primarily due to the finalization of a contractual agreement and their voluntary and required contributions. In accordance with the police pension fund requirements, certain members have, under certain conditions, may elect to increase or decrease their deductions, so this contribution figure always could fluctuate. Member benefit payments and withdrawals were 4.25 billion, and administrative expenses were 34.2 million. As of June 30th, 2024, the policy mix for the QPP portfolio asset allocation consists of the following categories. U.S. domestic equities was 26.7, fixed income was 37.9, international equities was 6.6, emerging markets was 3%, private equity and private real estate was 19.4, hedge funds was 5.6, and we had others 0.9%.
I interrupt for 1 minute?
Sure.
Definition of hedge fund.
A hedge fund? Well, I know out of all the systems, police and fire are the only systems that invest into it. To get a particular definition, I'll pass it over to Dan from BAM.
Typically, when we report hedge funds as a strategy, they are just that. They're limited partnerships that we make with various managers. It's deployed in a number of different sub-strategies, long-short equity, for instance, or systematic trading. I think we have some CTO. So, I mean, there are a number of different sub-strategies within that group that we call hedge funds, but they're all structured in a similar way, where they're open-end limited partnership structures that we can subscribe and redeem from at will. Police has sort of a unique.
But that might be the case.
Yeah.
But hedge funds, where I used to come from, are funds that hedge. Private equity firms, which what the other are not necessarily hedged.
That's fair. Yeah, hedge fund, that corner of the industry certainly has developed significantly, such that you can, invest in strategies that seek to outperform, equity markets, for instance, rather than offering a hedge to, market downsides.
Hedge fund
Right.
is a long and short operation.
Yeah, it's sort of turned into a pejorative term. Yeah. Yeah.
Describing properly what the funds are invested in and how they're invested.
Okay, that's a fair point. We can certainly take that back. I'll mention that as implemented, the allocation to the sub investments for the police, is what we call the police hedge fund portfolio, is designed such that it's not market neutral, but it's a low volatility implementation. So we use a mixture of these sub strategies to create sort of a stable value implementation.
I'm not questioning
Yeah.
the wisdom of doing it. I'm questioning the description of what you've done.
Okay. Yeah. We can certainly bring that back and check to see if there's more precise language that we could use for it. Yeah. Uh-huh. Fair enough.
All right. So just jumping into the Superior VSF fund that we have, we had 67.5 in equity and 32.5 in fixed income. For our police officers VSF fund, we had 67.4 in total equity and 32.6 in fixed income. So the total portfolio return was 12.6% for the POVSF. This is something that we always bring up to the audit committee's attention, just to give you guys an update regarding to our COPS 2.0 project. I'm pleased to announce that our rollout 2, which is basically focused on functionality related to our retired members, went into production in November 2023. We are currently working and designing on our rollout 3, which are activities which focuses on the functionality and design of our active members. Overall, in fiscal 2024, it was a pivotal year considering the increase of our returns of investments compared to 23's performance. We continue to build our great working relationship with the Comptroller's Office, with the Office of the Actuary, and of course the great audit team from Grant Thornton. A special thanks to all three of them for making the audit process seamless. We really appreciate all you guys. Thank you.
Okay, can you tell me why on page 19, you talk about credit service in a uniform member of the fire department?
On page 19.
Fire department.
Believe that's a typo. This is our SPD document. I'll work with our legal department to get that corrected.
All right.
Yeah, but don't you give credit for people that were in the fire department that transferred to the police department? And it's also vice versa. It goes the other way.
Yeah, so we do obviously have transfers throughout any city agencies, right? If they become a police officer,
No.
if they leave the service.
You have transfers between the two
transfers.
uniforms, but if I was an accountant, I can't transfer to the police department.
Yes.
Somebody ought to look
But we do have members that, then you would be part of NICERS.
Right.
If you
No, I'm just
decide-
using it.
Yeah, yeah, of
It's a
course.
uniform to a uniform.
Well, but the sanitation workers have uniforms.
Yeah, but that's,
Not a nice uniform.
yeah.
Yeah, I realize the sections regard to credited service, so yeah, we do have transfers.
I like the fact that you're in the cover, you have a dog sniffing a policewoman.
What kind of dog was it?
I don't know what kind of dog it is, them.
Probably a lab.
Yeah, and here's the hedge fund issue.
Larian, you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm fine right now.
Okay. Marcia? Okay, thank you for coming this morning and good luck.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Some scratch marks on them?
Sometimes.
Didn't give me a chance here.
No. So, yeah. This is a long meeting. Good morning. Please identify yourselves for the record and the minutes. And remember, if you heard, we don't have your standalone. We have the ACFA.
Simone Sawak from the Fire Pension Fund. I'm here with Amar Dial, our chief accountant. Oh, it just pushes.
Oh, it's on all the time, great.
A 20-year improvement.
Hours you have to hold it and hope for the best. So.
Yeah, we're still behind the times. Happy Lunar New Year to everyone. Jackie? Good morning. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the New York City Audit Committee for having the New York City Fire Pension Fund present their annual comprehensive financial reports for fiscal year 2024. In addition, I'd like to thank the Controller's Office, the Actuary Office, and the auditors, Grant Thornton, for their collaborative approach and making this process seamless as possible. Our ASCFR contains a combined financial statement and disclosure for the New York City Fire Pension Fund, the Qualified Pension Plan, and 2 additional funds that are administered by the Fire Fund. The 2 additional funds are the New York City Firefighters Variable Supplemental Fund and the New York City Fire Officers Variable Supplemental Fund. Our awards, the fund once again awarded the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for fiscal year 2023, issued by GFOA, Governmental Finance Officers Association. This is an annual award that is done every year. On our investment side, the Qualified Pension Plan portfolio of $20.6 billion returned a gain of 10% for the fiscal year 2024. The fund investment performance reflects a significant gain across most assets. The gain was above the actual assumed rate of 7%. Investment returns for the variable supplemental funds, the firefighters and fire officers posted gains of 12.8% and 12.7% respectively. That's a return. At the beginning of the fiscal year, the combined net position was approximately $19.4 billion for the fund. The fund closed the year with $21.1 billion, which is an increase of $1.7 billion and equates to 8.5% increase in return. For our members' information, during fiscal year 2024, the fund completed 631 new membership applications and conducted 2 classes for probationary firefighters. These probationary firefighters have since become members of the fund. The Retirement Counseling Unit consulted with numerous prospective retirees and processed retirement applications for more than 595 members. These applicants are now receiving 90% of their expected retirement benefits. Member contribution for 2024 was approximately $148.9 million, which is 25.9% higher when compared to the FY23 of $118 million. Thank you.
Well, if I may, you have on page 53, you say that for the 3-year period, the rate of return was only 3.1%. That's a dreadful performance.
It's 3.5, yes.
Yeah.
0.1.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a dreadful return. I'll make sure I take it up with the Bureau of Asset Management and the Control's Office.
Thank you.
I agree with you. I guess they will speak now.
As you know, the strategic asset allocations are set with a 10-year outlook. So we're using 10-year return assumptions in running optimization. Of course, that's done in conjunction with the fund's general and specialty consultants and approved by the boards of trustees. That particular 3-year period had lousy performance. I think if you looked across all systems, you'd see something in the 3% context. And it just happens to be that particular 3-year look back, which included a large drawdown, I think, in 2022, and then fiscal 23 and 24 sort of made up for that. So fiscal 24 performance, again, was something in the 10% range. I think as you look at the longer ranges out 10 years, we're back up around 7%. So it's meant to be an all-weather portfolio, but any given, you'll always see instances like that where you can find some look back, 3 or 5 year period that doesn't look so great in the context of a particular period end, like June 2024. Yeah, certainly, yeah. It's just that particular 3-year period, if I remember correctly, and I don't have the year by year in front of me, but I think 2022 fiscal was a negative year. We saw some come back in fiscal 2023, or maybe it was relatively flat then, and then we had a 10% return in 2024.
Out of the number, and I assume when you discuss it with people, you make the point you just made.
Larry, and you have any questions? Comments?
No, I'm going to pass. I'll pass on this one.
I have a statement here on 65 about if the collateral and securities loans, and you say all shortfall for the collateral value is covered by the agent. By that you mean what?
I think what we mean there is that we are fully indemnified in that product, meaning that there's if we incur some loss, the securities lending agent.
Okay, I thought that was the case, but that's the coverage is a little different than I was accustomed to seeing similar.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kaplan, can you share that page number with me? We'll review that language and see
On
if we can.
Page 65.
Thank you.
And then on 67, you say the boards of trustees of the funds set investment to assure adequate accumulation. You're not writing an insurance policy there.
Fair enough.
I wouldn't want to say that.
I do actually have a question, if I'm not interrupting. Can you tell me the average age of retirement of a firefighter?
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Can you give me an guesstimate?
They usually retire because the firefighters retire after 20 years of service. The uniform firefighters, so they come in at different ages. So if you want to get to that information, I can get it.
Okay, but what I'm asking is, I mean, I assume firefighters join the force at a fairly young age, and they retire after 20 years. Most of them retire after 20 years of service. How many work longer than that? What percentage?
Lauren, we'll have to get those precise numbers for you. I know Michael Sohn, our chief of staff, is on the Zoom. I don't know, Michael, if you have that information at hand for Larian.
No, but we'll gather those statistics for you.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the on page 60, and I'm looking at the number of retirees and beneficiaries and the number of active members. And I'm sure this is not an issue only in the fire department, but there are more retirees receiving benefits than there are active members. And I know that the size of the fire department has hung around 11,000 for years and years, which I guess is okay. But I'm just curious about how many firefighters actually, like, they've done their 20 and they retire. I'm just, so if I can get some sense of that, I'd like to hear that.
Okay, we'll put some stats together for you.
Please get the information to Katrina, and she'll distribute it to the audit committee.
Katrina's going to remind us every day.
Okay, and the other question I have is when, and I don't remember this, when the firefighters and also the cops, the other uniforms, retire, do they automatically go into the retirement healthcare system?
Yes, they do. They have to fill out the retiree health with OLR.
Right. So then they okay. So a 45-year-old firefighter who retires at 45
Correct.
goes into the retirement healthcare system.
Correct, but
Okay.
you know, the retiree health has a carve out for those members. They're still non-Medicare retirees, if you will.
Sure, of course, yeah. But they do end up in the retirees' healthcare
Yes.
system. Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. And if you can get me some stats or on, you know, average number of years of service for retirement. I mean, I'm not so concerned with the age. I would like to just know how many go 20 years, how many go 25, et cetera.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Moving right along, if you go to page 29, oh, I'm sorry. If you go to page 69, there's a statement that all funds deposits are insured by the FDIC. That's right, and collateralized by securities. As I understand the rules of the game, to the extent you're not FDIC insured, you get the collateral securities from the bank, but not and. It says depositors are insured, and you don't necessarily get them collateralized when they're insured.
Right. I'll check the language on that statement.
I think you
certainly.
should look at that.
Yeah. It could be drawing a distinction between demand deposit accounts, which are effectively cash and FDIC insured. And
the other thing is that I'm accustomed to seeing when they talk anything where you have uncollateralized cash, that you rely upon the creditworthiness of the bank, and that's monitored by somebody in the organization on a regular basis. You might take a look at the kind of disclosure that's meant
certainly
in this sort of thing. And I've got another statement here. The boards of trustees set investment objectives to assure adequate accumulation of reserves. You're not an insurance company. You work to accumulate, but you don't guarantee. And I use using the word assured.
right. So similar to page 67, that
Yeah,
comment.
that's
Assurance is imprecise, and we
word
can find better language.
I would.
Yeah. And again, that was also on page 69, sir?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I once had to sign things like this. I learned to be excessively cautious. Okay, I think I'm done.
Okay, thank you for coming this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the New York City Other Post-Employment Benefits Plan, the OPEB. Oh, God.
Oh, the hell with it. What's OPEB is? We got another one?
OPEB.
Maybe this is it.
No, that it's not there. It's
There it is. Okay.
Mike, let me know when I should start. Sure. Hi, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to present the fiscal year 2024 Other Post-Employment Benefit Plan financial statements today. My name is Man-Han Chung, the Assistant Director for Accounting Services at OMB. Joining me is Anthony O'Duncy, the Unit Head for Accounting Services. On the call, Christopher Santangelo, the Assistant Director for Miscellaneous Budget, and also from the Actuary's Office, Tom O'Hara, the Administrative Actuary. For this fiscal year 2024 OPEB plan financials, on the statement of changes in net position, page 13, employee contributions remain fairly consistent at approximately $3.2 billion in fiscal year 2024. Interest income increased 50% from $151 million in 2023 to $225 million in 2024. On page 12, the statement of net position, the net position restricted for post-employment benefits at the end of fiscal year 2024 decreased by $280 million. There were no prepayments or discretionary contributions in 2024. The total OPEB liability from 2023 to 2024 increased by approximately $3 billion to $103 billion. The liability net of fiduciary net position was approximately $98 billion at the end of 2024. Those were the highlights for this fiscal year. I'll open it up to any questions.
I guess this is mainly for the actuary's office. The question that was asked by Larian about a fireman, firewoman, getting a pension in the 40s after 20 years of service, that's all calculated and run through these models.
Yes, that's correct.
And in a sense, the city is funding it through this system on a current basis.
Correct, yes.
So Larry, I just wanted to get that out to address your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I have also a question. What's the annual payout for OPEB? I mean, what is the city just paying out on an annual basis?
So for benefits payments for fiscal year 2024, it was approximately $3.7 billion.
2.7, okay. Thank you.
But once again, there's three components of that. It's the health insurance, it's the Medicare reimbursement, and it's the welfare funds for the retirees. Those are pretty much the three items that the actuary calculates for the city's liability on an annual basis. Yeah, go.
If you will, please look at page 9. Sure. And you refer to total liabilities decrease due to a decrease in investment securities payable. What are investment securities payable?
Sorry.
Is that a payable in connection with the purchase or sale of investment securities? That language doesn't make any, that in the next paragraph don't make any sense.
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Oh, so this was due to a investment that was traded on prior to June 30th, but was not actually paid for or settled until after June 30th. So we had to.
Well, that's not the investment security. It was the payable. It was your payable for the purchase.
But because it was brought to our attention that we actually had, based on the accounting principles we have here, we have to record investments based on the trade date.
I understand that, but it's not the investment securities that's payable. It's the purchase price of the investments that's payable.
So the language could be, actually, we'll take a look at the language.
Language in 2 paragraphs.
Mm-hmm.
And then total liability. One more minute and I'm done. Okay. I can give you a couple of typos, but.
Yes, you could. Sure.
City of New York, capital T.
Duly noted, and we'll take a look at it.
Every place it exists.
If you can share any of the edits to Katrina, she'll share with us.
All right, Larian, any questions?
No, I'm good for now.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, man. Thank you for coming. The next item on the agenda is I'd like to have a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Thank you.
Mikhail, can we stop recording, please?
Thank you. We are now back in open session from executive session. And there is no other business on the agenda, so I'd like to have a motion to adjourn this meeting. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.